Good afternoon to everybody in North America, Canada. I know that we'll have a couple people from Europe. It's starting to get into your Friday night. So for those of you that are sacrificing family time on a Friday to tune in, I really appreciate that. And for those of you in Asia, which is the majority of my network, because that's where I spent most of my time, I know you'll be seeing this on replay. So in advance, for those of you in Asia, please feel free to engage with both Rachel and I on the replay as well, because we're always around and we can do this as well. So at any rate, and for those of you in the Middle East and Africa, I'm not forgetting you as well. Thank you for taking the time to tune in as well. And I'll be periodically throughout the next hour in my conversation with a very special guest, giving the LinkedIn and Facebook audiences an opportunity to ask us anything you want, either my guest or myself. Anything is fair game, so you can have at it and come at us really hard. We're going to talk about a really important topic today, mainly centered around purpose, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And I'd like to everybody join me in welcoming a very special guest, Rachel Baribeau, who is in northern Florida, I think, right, Rachel? Is that right?
I am very near Amelia Island.
There we go. That's great. And so I'm so just take a couple of minutes to set this up, and then we'll get into the chat. And Rachel, first of all, I'd like to start off. There's so much to talk about regarding Rachel, and I met Rachel through Rachel Beck's program many months ago and everything, and was really intrigued and fascinated by what she had to say. And I'm quite confident that all of you watching will be equally intrigued as well. And but you can find Rachel on Sirius. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, I just need a little disclaimer here for people outside the U.S. will be centered around U.S. sports, football, but not the round football that most of you in my network, we call it soccer. But anyway, I kind of call it football because I spent more time working outside the U.S. than in the U.S. But we'll be talking about that oval-shaped object and a bit about sports and a bit about some things that are big in the U.S. And one of those things is SiriusXM. It's very it's satellite radio, to make a long story short, and Rachel can be heard on SiriusXM, ESPNU, the SEC and ACC channels, two of my favorite channels. And I'm a big college football nut, and I'm always tuned into those types of channels, and so you can find her there and across their family of networks. So you've heard her here on the Packard Network Live. Next time you hear her, she was the first known female sports reporter to participate in a professional football training camp. And again, for those of you familiar with the sport, that's a big deal. Training camp. That's where the real grind is before the season. So a lot of for those of you that are aware of that, nothing but respect for somebody and to be the first female sports reporter there. That's incredible, because nowadays there's female sports reporters all over the place. So we're talking to a pioneer today. And Rachel graduated from Auburn University Broadcast Journalism program. She's also been on Fox Sports. I mentioned ESPN, but the main ESPN, CBS Sports, which is one of the big four networks in the United States, and Yahoo. So she's kind of been all over the place with this, and has a lot of things. We'll talk about a lot of things. But in 2016, she penned a piece for GridironNow called "College Football is Breaking My Heart," and I'm going to not talk about that now in the intro, but we're going to talk about that in our discussion a little bit, because I think there's a lot that can be extracted by those of you watching by hearing this particular component of Rachel's story, which led to her really finding and living and acting on her purpose. You know, it's one thing to have a purpose and think about it and everything. It's another to actually live it. And I think you're going to be convinced with our conversation that she definitely lives her purpose. So, and then Rachel will also talk about, she developed I'm Changing the Narrative. And again, I'll kind of save what that is, but that's very important. It's purpose driven, and it has to do with one of the sports in the U.S., college football, that had, and I don't know, several years ago started to kind of encounter some issues, and we'll talk about what some of those are and what Rachel's doing it. Rachel's one that's on the field. She's not on the sidelines. And so when she sees a problem, she does something about it. So there's a lot of you in my network, and we'll acknowledge who's tuned in currently live, but a lot of you in my network that talk a lot about action. So you're going to love this chat as well. And so finally, I do want to mention, and I know we're going to talk about this as well, there's a former Alabama and NFL star, Kevin Turner, that succumbed to ALS and CTE. And we're going to talk about that. I think that all of us probably have somebody in our lives that we've lost. I just lost a close loved one as well, and it's always really tough. And you begin to evaluate your association with that particular person, and so I think Rachel's got some great. Rachel can connect Kevin to her purpose as well, and what an incredible person Kevin was and still lives in his spirit. So I think that's great. So Rachel, with that, I'll take a sip of water and welcome you to the program.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's good. It's really terrific. So why don't we start by, maybe you could start by talking us. So you went to Auburn. Mm-hmm. What I'm really interested to know, when you got out of Auburn, did you have any idea that you'd be doing what you're doing now back then?
Zero.
Okay.
Zero.
So tell us what your mindset was like and all of this stuff, and then we'll just kind of evolve it from there.
Look, I had goals and I had dreams. Yes, I wanted to work at ESPN. Yes, I wanted to work on the sidelines. Yes, I want to be on television, but never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would break barriers for women across the world. I always say to people, I'm doing it for all the big girls and all the little girls. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you're age 6 to 96, if you're still breathing, you've got the opportunity to dream and to act on those dreams and to take action. That's it. A dream is a dream, and that's wonderful, but you've got to get the shovel and do the work. Yeah. And so never in my life, Brett, did I ever think that I would break barriers. I'd be the first female host on SiriusXM. That I would vote for the Heisman, one of 870 people to do that in the world, to host the very first college football playoff and then work with them for 5 years. And I didn't even tell you this, but I actually just retired from sportscasting. It's crazy.
Wow.
And people would, and so here's the thing. People, I didn't retire because I was unemployed. I was employed by Sirius. I found my purpose to be so assaulting in the best possible way. It grabbed my soul. It was such a calling that I no longer found joy anymore in talking about sports. I found joy in speaking to athletes, speaking to coaches, speaking to law enforcement, speaking to, prison ministry, to reservations, to high schools, to halfway houses. And so, but yes, all before that, for 17 years, I climbed the ladder, my friend. I paved the way for a lot of young women, covering college sports, covering some pro sports as well. My time when I was broadcasting in Atlanta, and it's a part of my life that I am forever proud of because it set me up to do what I do today.
Yeah, and I mean, to be a pioneer in many. In that industry, especially as a woman, is incredible. I spend a lot of time elevating women on my platform, and all the women that I've known for 30 years around the world, working across 30 countries, they're not surprised. They kind of got used to it. It actually becomes a habit because it actually helps me a lot because it builds diversity into what I do. So it's not just giving. It's not a diversity initiative. It's actually because it's a proven fact that women do add creativity to any situation, and that whether you're in Asia or you're in the U.S. or you're on a sideline reporter or you're on SiriusXM, it definitely adds. And you did pave the way. I mean, I don't know how many. If you turn on the NFL Network and look at these women that are assigned to teams, right? The Cowboys, the 49ers, the Steelers, they're all women. And you look at ESPN, right? And I'm saying this more for the benefit of the viewers and not necessarily you. You turn on I've got a little sports book set up in the basement of one of our properties. And basically I watch during the fall up to 30 games consecutively. So I've set this up where with technology, you can do it. And at the start of the game, they'll go down to the sideline reporter, and they're all female on the college game, right? It's not necessarily, and many of the pros are the same way. So, I mean, Rachel, you paved the way for a lot of these people, right? I mean, how does that make you feel?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for what you just talked about. Thank you for being an ally for women, and not just in like word, but in deed, like in the way that and I bet if people opened your books, I bet that they would find that the women were comparably paid to men. And I just love that. I love that. I'm a big action person. I'm a big, show me, right? Don't just tell me, show me. And I know I love that. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of all women across the country. And being the first, I remember there was one time I was on Sirius, and I did sideline reporting for many years, but I remember one time I was on Sirius, and we all encounter tough days, and especially being a trailblazer in the industry. I remember one day I felt like quitting. And I told this to a young woman that I was mentoring, and she said something to me that just struck me. And she said, if you quit, what will I do? And I got it then. I got it in my soul that I was not trailblazing and cutting down bushes and emotions and expectations and just the way things had always been done just for myself. Brett, I was doing that for all the women that were coming behind me.
Yeah. And did you feel that at the time? Because I know I've done a lot of things in my career, and in hindsight, upon reflection, it's like, wow, really, really did this. And I did this in Japan, and this in Singapore, this in Korea. But at the time, I mean, I knew what I was doing, but I didn't realize the impact. Did you realize the impact that you were having as it was happening?
When she said that, I got it, right? When she said that, I got it. And, but I think there is and I'm writing about this in a book that'll be out next year. I think sometimes, I think sometimes you have to get a certain distance away from a miracle or a great happening in your life to really be able to size it up and to really be able to measure the impact. Oftentimes you can feel it in the moment. I felt it when she said those words, but now I get it. I remember, and I'm not even that old, but I remember, this is crazy. I had a friend that worked in television or worked in the sports world. And I said, look, give me some honest feedback. I remember being in his office, and he said, you're not going to believe this. He said, you're too colorful. You're too bold. You should try wearing some beige or white. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what? Like, what? Okay. First of all, I'm Latina and Native American and lots of it. But I was like, what? And so, Brett, now when I see a woman wearing this color on the sidelines or doing her job, I think back to those moments, and I said, rock it, girl. You wear it. You look amazing. And I just, So, and even in those ways, and I took his advice, and for a moment I was like, okay, maybe I can tone my personality down, tone me down. Then I went, heck no, I'm not toning me down. No. God made me in his image. No.
That's right. And you were leading, pioneering, but another word for it is creating, right? And, you're creating a pathway for other people. Yeah. That is like wonderful. I mean, there's not a better feeling than that, right? When that happens. You mentioned, I do want to talk about something you mentioned just a minute ago about pay, right? And, there's a lot of talk around that. And, there is a discrepancy, and there are biases, most of which are unconscious, but there's still a bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And many people don't even know what unconscious bias is, right? So they need to learn about that. But you can do something about that. But if you want to improve performance, okay, learn about biases and learn to just learn about them so you can manage them then you can do something about that. And you mentioned the pay. My last assignment was in Singapore, and one of the initiatives that we undertook was to attempt to not to attempt, but to significantly close the gap between the genders across Asia. And these are in the big markets of Hong Kong and Singapore were the big hubs, but then we had Taiwan and Indonesia as well. And so one of the things that we had to do is you've got a limited pool, the way that any business works, right? And whether it's in sports or, I'm an ex-banker, right? In banking, you've got a limited pool of funds, and then you have to perform or you don't perform. If you shrink your performance, you're probably not going to have funds to pay much of anything to anybody. But fortunately, we were growing, so we had funds. And then it comes down to, how do you distribute it? Well, you can't do it just based off of gender, race, ethnicity. You got to perform. But what happens if you have equal performances, right, across genders? There are ways to do it, but it takes a bit of pain. And part of that pain is actually, it's not, I'm not big on reparations, just because I don't like to get into the politics, but it's not a reparation. But if you've got equal, you have to look at the intangibles. So that's what I would do. And I would look, and sometimes a male, this is the very end, then you put this lens on it. And then you look at the performance, everything's equal. I would always look at the intangibles. So what did the Rachel do to create something, and what did Brett do to create something? And well, Brett delivered, they delivered equally, but Rachel actually paved the way for more women. So so we're going to need to take part of what we would normally give Brett for an equal pay, and we're going to give Rachel a premium. And I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but that's what it takes, right, Rachel? It's like, we'll get into your purpose here in a few minutes, but you've got to do something, right? Because when the rubber hits the road, as many people say, and when everything's on the line, as they often say in sports, what are you going to do, right? You going to think about it, talk about it, or are you going to make that decision to say, and you don't, I mean, I can say this after the fact because I'm not in that role, and I was in a very senior role. I didn't tell Brett in this case that, well, I'm giving some of your money to, I can't do that, right? I just say, Brett, your bonus in this case, the bonuses of these people was something like, for the year, say 12,000 Singapore dollars. Okay. So I would say, well, Rachel, you get 14 and Brett, you get 10. Yeah. And Brett, and the way that you deliver the message is fine. You don't even bring this into it, but you still made it happen. You had a reason for making it happen. Then we had other cases where Brett was more creative than Rachel. So in that particular case, we didn't punish Rachel, but we would pay equal.
Got it.
Across. So, the world's imperfect, but we need more people. I'm glad you brought up the pay, and I'm sorry to take some of our time to talk about this because it's important, right? And, you took action to fulfill your purpose. And one of my purposes is and I was selfish, by the way, in doing this, Rachel, because I knew if I give Rachel that 14 and Brett 10 in this example, I knew my performance would improve. So it was like, nobody's getting punished here. And the team's going to win because you did something to create a better pathway so that next financial year, we're going to be better, right? So
just very quickly on that.
Sure.
Subject, some thoughts there. One, I didn't used to be a woman that talked to other women about how much I got paid. And I had a girlfriend of mine who works in the sports industry. She challenged me on that. She said, if we don't talk about what we get paid, then how do we know if we're underpaid? How do I know if you're, even women to women, right? So she challenged me to start talking about that. I had another girlfriend, a different girlfriend that was in a very senior leadership role in the college football world, found out that her male, just as you mentioned, counterpart doing the exact same thing as her was getting paid twice as much. Yep. And so she was able to go and to kind of plead her case and to make a case for what she does. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing, and it's a principle that I live by, is this, and you hit on it, and I love it, is what are you doing to differentiate yourself? What are you doing to earn the equal, the bonus? What are you doing to, I say this all the time, don't just do your job and leave. Call back, follow up, encourage somebody, leave bits of joy like glitter, like really go above and beyond. There's a great book, and I should connect you to this gentleman. You would love him. His name's Bob Berg, and it's called The Go-Giver. And it talks about a sales principle of just giving extra, going the extra mile, and how that helps. And so I think that's huge. And the third thing I'll say is, where we are in the world with really competitive job markets, if you are a boss or a company, the head of a company, and you have the opportunity to make those decisions, you need to start thinking about those kind of equal pay and taking care of your people, because now more than ever, somebody will leave you and go find another job that will pay them an equitable wage. So there's a lot of layers to what you said. And I'm just, again,
you're right.
I'm just being honest, but I would have loved to work with you. How about that? If I worked in the banking.
Yeah, well, likewise as well. And I mean, the fact that I'm a sports fanatic, that would help also. But anyway, no, I would love to. It's pretty evident also to the viewers that we have a lot of intersections in our beliefs and our values. Just a sec, Rachel here. So Joe Gonzalez, Joe, welcome. Thank you all. Joe always shows up here, and we have Paul from Nigeria. Joe's from Florida as well. I think he's from the Miami area. We have Rebecca. Rebecca, thanks for joining. Rebecca's in Arizona in the U.S. Just a few people here, and Joe Gonzalez said Auburn Tigers, and then he sent some bam here. So that's great. And let's see, Rebecca. All women appreciate trailblazers like you, Rachel. From Rebecca. We've got and Joe made a couple comments about the Great Resignation, which you just pointed out that's going on now. People do have an advantage, and the message for leaders. I'm tough on leaders on this network. I focus only on growing leaders that grow leaders, and you've got to make those tough, pioneering, creativity type of decisions if you're really going to grow the next generation and blaze the trail. It's not only about performance, it is about going. I'm glad you brought up the extra mile, because that's so important. And a lot of people think extra mile and they think Napoleon Hill and all that stuff in the past, but it couldn't be more true than today.
Look, I say this all the time, Brett. People are my currency, therefore I'm a billionaire. And so for me, going the extra mile is inherent. And I know that is not everybody's, that's not in their soul and in their DNA, but you can learn that. You can learn about going the extra mile. You can learn about taking care of people and putting people first, and going back and be the person that it's as simple as sometimes putting up your grocery cart at the grocery store, or picking something up, a piece of trash. I mean, it's little things like that. And then you start to add on over and over, and you really think about other people. What we teach, and I know we'll get into it later, we teach in my movement. And I learned from Kevin Turner, who played for the Patriots, the Eagles, Alabama, won the Ed Block Courage Award, which is voted on by other NFL teammates, not, reporters like myself at one time. Yeah. But he taught me the greatest secret to life, and forgive me. He said, he was wonderful. He said, it's not about you. You were not born for you. And when you figure that out, happy tears, everything else changes. Everything else changes. And so when I start to get out of whack, and I have to, I'll be funny and say, is when I've checked myself before I wreck myself, I have to go put myself in timeout sometimes. And often I'll find that it's a me-centered attitude, and I have to reframe and get myself out of that attitude. But the greatest secret, I think, once people learn this and you apply it, you continue to apply it. Now you're going to have moments and days where you screw up, because we're human. Right. But once you apply that and believe it foundationally deep down in your heart that it's not about you, that you were not born for you, everything else changes.
Yeah, exactly. What a great angle to look at the world from, right? And it's probably not the most common angle that if you look at the majority of the population. So there's your first tip for those of you watching this, and both live and on replay as well. So straight from Kevin. So tell us a bit about how Kevin inspired you and what you do even today because of Kevin.
Yes. such a great story. We did something. I created a segment on Fridays because I am a glass half full girl. My mother, before she departed this earth on May 1st, 2019, she used to say, you're the ultimate optimist. And so sometimes in sports news, as you know, as a sports nut, sometimes it's negative news. Negative news sells. So I created something, and I can't stand that. So I created something called Pay It Forward Friday. And we had really neat people on Fridays and I took this segment from Alabama to Atlanta to Sirius. And so we would have really neat people on.
That's great.
Yeah. And I just wanted to leave people on Fridays with something positive. And so a friend of mine named Lisa Horn, recommended Kevin. Now, Kevin had recently been diagnosed with ALS. And so I thought that Kevin was going to come and do a telephone interview. And at the last minute, I get this call and he says, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama at the time. And he says, I'm almost there. I'm running a few minutes late. Now, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush and say all athletes are divas, but some can have a little diva quality. So for him to even say, I'm running late, I'm coming.
Yeah.
So which was crazy. So he walks in the studio. He walks in the studio.
Yep.
And okay, let me preface this by saying everybody in your life is going to have one of these moments. And I teach on this. You need to be looking and open for your Kevin, because what happened in that studio that day changed the trajectory of my entire life. Before I met Kevin, I loved people. I was a good person. My middle name's Joy, but all my goals and dreams prior to meeting Kevin involved me. They were all about me. I wanted fame. I wanted money. I wanted to be seen on television. It was all about me. And he walked in. I can verbatim say what he said. And so we're on the air and and he's talking to everybody out in the radio land, but he's really talking to me. Now, what had happened prior to the meeting was his ALS started in his hands. So he needed some help opening his soda top bottle. He needed some help turning up the volume on the headsets. Now, I was helping him and I felt pity for him. I did not want to feel pity, but I felt it. And he picked up on that just from a soul level. So we started the interview and he looks over at me and he goes, don't you feel sorry for me? Now, again, he's talking to everybody in radio land, but he's looking right at me.
You're live on the air.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. And he's talking to everybody out there, but he's looking right at me and he says, don't you feel sorry for me? You could step off a curb tomorrow and get hit by a bus. I got a heads up on my life. I say I'm sorry. I hug my kids. I live every day to the fullest.
Wow.
And in that moment, old Rachel, I remember him walking out of the studio and I can still see him walking down the hallway. And it was at that moment, they say Robert Frost, two roads, diverged in the woods and it was like the old Rachel was going to go this way and it was going to be all about me and just a selfish life. But in that moment, I said, I'm going to fight for this man. I didn't even know him. I didn't even know, I barely knew him, but I said, I'm going to fight for him. I ended up doing a fundraiser, climbing Kilimanjaro for him. We created a documentary that Mike Ditka narrated, but he changed the trajectory of my life because he taught me about how to really live and how to not have pity for yourself. It's okay to feel it for a moment, but don't stay there. And so not long after, just a few years after, I began speaking about purpose. I used his story. I used my story up on Kilimanjaro to talk about something greater than what you do for work or what you do as an athlete. And this applies to everybody in the world. Yep. So yes, to say that he made an indelible mark on my life would be a massive understatement. I like to say that I'm changing the narrative. The movement that I did create 6 years ago was in large part by Kevin Turner.
Wow, that is amazing. Thank you for talking about that. And we might, again, I'll encourage the audience, if you have any questions, tee them up. And let's talk briefly about I'm changing the narrative. And maybe, again, keep in mind, we have a lot of soccer fans, mostly soccer fans that will see this video. But tell us a bit about I'm changing the narrative and the inception, and then what's happening today, and then how others can consider joining to support it.
Yes, absolutely. So look, it just happened to start in college athletics. It just happened to start in college football. So
Yeah.
that's football, the American kind. But I want to say to everybody, because I want to keep their attention. I want to say to everybody around the world, one, thank you for tuning in. But two, I don't care how old you are, age 6 to 96. I believe that you were created to be a king, a queen, or royalty. I believe there's greatness inside of you. I believe you were born to create a legacy. I believe you were born for a purpose. I believe you were born to leave this world a better place. Now, 6 years ago, it just happened to start, as I mentioned, in college football, but I saw a problem. It was a very dark summer in the news circuit. With college football, it was domestic violence, sexual violence, guys getting in trouble all over the country. And I believe I was created, God created me to be a do something girl. So I was just audacious enough, Brett, to believe that I could affect change. And so I created this very simple curriculum, and it said, who are you away from the field? Now sub in your work. So who are you away from work? What makes your heart beat faster? What are you passionate about? So I created that. And then I talked about my own experience with domestic violence. That was my first talk almost 6 years ago. Now, in the 6 years, I've worked with over 50 colleges, many of them multiple times. I work with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. I'm working with them this summer for the 4th time.
Wow.
I work with law enforcement in multiple states. I'm about to start prison ministry. I work with halfway houses, high schools, corporations. And the whole movement is based on this idea. How do you have good love for yourself so you can have good love for others? We talk largely about mental health, soul care, as we call it, which is deeper than self-care. We talk about, again, purpose and legacy, and we talk about interpersonal relationships. So you asked me at the beginning of this interview, and it's kind of neat. Could I ever see myself here? No, because I created something from nothing.
I mean, who would have, you couldn't have even dreamed this one up, right?
Never. And it got so big that I walked away from my identity for 17 years, which was being a sportscaster. It no longer brought me joy. So I guess my second nugget for people today, there's probably more in there, is if you've been thinking about making a jump, but you're scared, you're fearful, it's time. We are not promised another day. We're not promised another moment. As Kevin said, you could step off a curb tomorrow and get hit by a bus. If you've been thinking about starting a blog, starting a movement, starting a side hustle, starting a nonprofit, starting a second business, learning, whatever it is, right? Do it. The time is now. I am living proof. And there have been hard times in the almost 5.5 years. I've been in the fetal position on the floor. I've cried. I've been knocked down, but every single time I've gotten up. And it's only getting bigger. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm just so incredibly blessed.
I have a feeling that you don't subscribe to the victim mindset.
No. I say, you know what I say?
And it's not a leading question or anything, but I just have this feeling, right? I mean, I can hear that in your voice, right?
Yeah. You know what I say to people? I say, I'm a victor, not a victim.
Yeah, there you go. Wow, I love that. That is a great one. So how do you approach adversity? So those times when you feel like getting on the floor, curling up and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's such a dark day. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. What is going on here? I can't believe it. So what keeps you going to get through that storm? And then the sun will come back out again, right?
Such a great question.
Yeah.
I can see why you're so successful at what you do. Look, I'm a big advocate for mental health. People ask me all the time when I go to speak, they're like, well, are you a mental health professional? No, I'm a mental health advocate. So that means I normalize conversations about mental health and hopefully get you to go see a therapist if you need it. You can do it online. There's there's free resources online wherever you live in the world. And so on those days, because I suffered from clinical depression, and I want to say a trigger warning, after losing my mom to cancer in 2019, 2 months later, I almost took my own life. I had what I would call a perfect storm of, I had gone through a breakup. I lost my mother, and I was financially not in a good place because I had helped my mother financially and I had not really worked through a cancer battle. So all it took was one night of being sleep deprived, 2 nights of being sleep deprived, getting up early for Sirius. And I got into a really bad place mentally. Now, I believe the reason why I survived was to go back. I say, I've got buckets of water for people that are still burning. And I go all over the world and I tell people, you're not defective. You're not broken. You're not weak. Ask for help. I talk to people about a battle plan. Suicide is a great plague that's on our land right now, all over the world. If I could very quickly teach people, I teach people a battle plan, what I did not know that night. My friend, I was laying in my bed at 3:00 in the morning with these ideations about to do this. And the voices in my head told me, you can't call anybody, you'll burden them. And that was such a lie. I had so many of my friends and family say to me later, Rachel, if you would have gone through it, you would have wrecked my life. You would have broken my heart. So what I teach people is to find what I like to call your 3 ride or dies, your 3 people that if you won the lottery or if you had nothing, they would be the people that you would call. Okay. And they're the people you would call if you had a flat tire, or again, if you were going on a cruise ship for 2 and you wanted to take somebody. They are people you love. Right. And you find them and you tell them, listen, you're one of my 3 people. If I'm ever in a bad place mentally, or I have a flat tire, or I need something, you're my person. So I'm going to call you. So what should have happened to me that night with that battle plan is I should have called the first person if they didn't answer or text. I should have called the second, then the third. The 4th person is to a crisis hotline. Now, I say to people this, if you're in a really, really bad place, the first person is a crisis hotline. Then you can call later on your friends for support to come over. But what that does, and people ask me this all the time, do I tell my people? Yes. Then you teach them to go find their 3 people. And then it starts to go out like a ripple on a pond. Where we get in trouble mentally, are you ready for this? Is isolation. And I love solitude, but it is a fine line between solitude and isolation. And we get into trouble when we're by ourselves and we isolate. I was using my telephone to tell people, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I was not fine. And then it just took the sleep deprivation to take it up a level where I actually had suicidal thoughts. So what I would say to people is, 1, develop your battle plan, find your people, tell them they're your people, and tell them to go find more people so that we don't struggle alone. 2, I would say, check in with yourself. If it's the worst day and it's 11 a.m. and you're struggling, ask for help. Talk to somebody. You may need to seek therapy. Check in with yourself. And also, I'm really big, we mentioned it, of soul care. Find what sets your soul on fire. Find what nourishes you. It's yours is different than mine, right? For me, it's napping, playing golf. I watch The Office. It's just a silly show that makes me laugh. I watch it at night with all the negative news. I like to listen to music. I love to dance. And when I dance, I can't be depressed. I can't be sad when I dance. So find what nourishes yourself. It's unique to you, and make sure you schedule it in, whether it's 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour. And this is the last thing I'll say as a woman. People say, well, I'm going to get my nails done or my hair done. That's great. But getting my hair done has never touched my soul, my friend.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And because what we're really, you just said a lot, I'm digesting it. This conversation is going, in my opinion, better than I had planned it out. And we're in territory that I didn't think we talked about, but I think this is important. So I want to keep talking about this. This is great. And I think you and I together on this program can hopefully spread the word and impact a lot of people, because it is a big issue in today's world, right? Around the world. Yeah. So you talked about your essentially a close circle of friends, people that you can count on for anything, right? Good or bad, right? So let's call it a circle. You hear a lot of people talk about circle of trust, and these are the people that are in my circle, and it's really hard to get in, because it's really hard for me to let anybody in my circle. I protect it, and those few people that are there, they know they're there, and some people that aren't there, they're trying to get there, and maybe someday they will. But ultimately, we are our own judge of who those are. What kinds of so in your opinion, Rachel, your experience actually, because you went through this trauma, what is it? Family in your circle, or friends, or former work colleagues, or could you tell us a little bit about that? You don't have to reveal who they are.
Yeah. They're a mix for me. They're a mix. For me, it was, it's some dear friends, and then some family, but friends. Look, you call them family, friends and family. They're friends that have made themselves like family.
Right.
And they would have been the ones that I would call, and they told me afterwards when I shared this, they said, "I'm not mad at you, but it broke my heart that you didn't think you could reach out to me at that time." And oftentimes that is the lie that we tell ourselves. Another really good strategy that I think your audience will hopefully will save it or change a life is fact or feeling. Okay. My business manager is an AA sponsor, so he's very wise. He's taught me a lot of this. His name's Jason Parker, but he says fact or feeling. Much of what I was feeling that night was indeed feelings. I'm a loser. I can't keep anything. I'm a failure. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to be seen as a failure. My mom's died. My boyfriend's gone. All these things. Those were feelings.
Yep.
Facts were, even if I lost my house, I can get another house. Facts are, I am loved. Facts are, I am valuable. Facts are, my life is worth living.
Exactly.
Yeah. But feelings will lie to you. They'll lie to anybody who's within the sound of the voice of this program. And so have conversations with your kids, get your coworkers. I had a man listen to one of my podcasts, and he owned a small business. I think it was somewhere in Oklahoma. And he reported back and said, after I listened to you, I gathered everybody in my office down at the conference table. And I said, how's everybody doing? No, really, how are you doing? And he said, I began to institute mental health days. I let people have, it was either a day or two a month where they either got off early or they had a whole day off to take care of their mental health. And he said, you would not believe it, but you probably would. Productivity shot up. Everybody was happy. People were happier. People felt like they could, we say in my movement, take the mask off. And I'm not talking about your COVID mask. I'm talking about the mask that you wear for the world.
Yeah.
And so, I would say gather your people around your family table, your dinner table, and start to say, let's have real conversations, not fluff conversations about the weather or, work, or how are you feeling? Really? No. How are you feeling? Is there anything here's another great, I'm just giving them all today, but here's another.
No, that's great. Yeah.
It is in business, relationships, or friendships. If somebody is going to confide in you, here's a great way to start the conversation. Would you like me to listen to provide you a solution, or would you like for me to listen just to listen? That'll keep you out of a lot of arguments.
Won't it though? Won't it though? Yeah. And there's a lot of value in that, and depending on the situation, right? And I think the world in general needs to become better listeners, right? And Rebecca's in the program here right now, and Rebecca, I know that you've written quite a bit about listening and how important that is, and that's invaluable advice. And I added on to one of Rebecca's posts a couple months ago that also asking is really important, right? So make sure you ask before you listen. And I think you raised a great point on that as well. What's the purpose here, right? And because I might think I'm doing good for you by being here present, right? We're having a conversation, but you're kind of viewing it as you want to talk about oil and I want to talk about water, and the two aren't going to mix very well, right?
Well, and here's where I learned it. One of my dearest friends, her name's Melanie Reese. If she wasn't one of my dearest friends, she would be my therapist, because she is such a talented therapist.
Yeah.
And she taught me one day, it was after church and we were having brunch, and she was kind of going through some things. And so she was pouring out her heart, because she herself is a therapist that gets everybody else's stuff. So she's pouring out her heart. Yeah. And here I am. I'm thinking she wants me to provide her solution. So I'm like, well, how about you do this and that? And she slammed her hands on the bar where we were having lunch. And she said, dang it, I just want you to listen. And I went, oh, yeah, I get it.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for teaching me.
Yeah, I want to go back, if you don't mind, on this subject, because I think this is such an important subject. So you go back to that time that you were at the low point, right? That evening. And So what did you do? Did you call those three people, or what did, so this is something you kind of learned to do afterwards. So
I did.
yeah.
And
What did you do to save yourself?
It went on, the whole thing went on for a couple of hours. And it started as, people often say, and the experience for people that have survived suicidal ideation or going through the act and are here to tell you, some people will tell you it's voices. For me, it was one voice. And it sounded like a snake. You can put two and two together. I believe in God and the devil. And it was like a slithering in my ear. And it was just, you're worthless. You are a piece of, garbage. The world would be better off without you. And when that would not stop, I tossed and I turned, that would not stop. I saw myself going downstairs and picking up the pistol that was on top of my refrigerator and putting that in my mouth and ending my life. And I just wept and wept. And I do believe, for me as a woman of faith, I am very faith driven. The movement is not faith based. I am personally, but I do believe that there was a battle in my room that night, a great spiritual battle. And I do believe, and I'm going to be bold and say this, what the devil meant to take me out actually gave God and me the blueprint to be able to save countless lives.
Yeah. And we're working on that right now on this Friday, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's great. So ultimately your faith pulled you through.
I believe that. And again, I have to come at this from a non-faith based way when I teach within I'm changing the narrative. Sure. That's why I teach. That's why I teach about the battle plan. That's why I teach about facts or feelings.
So we're talking about you. I mean, this is personal, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And by the way, I appreciate you sharing this as well. And it does make an impact, right? And I've heard you tell people before, you impact one person, you've made an impact, right? And so that's what I'm hoping that we can do with this as well, and you're right. I'm not a mental health expert either, but I'm a mental health advocate, people need to get the right type of help. And I think what we're hearing from you today, part of being an advocate, not necessarily a certified professional, one of the differences is that we can provide those, the circle, encourage people to make sure you build a circle. Because I know people, Rachel, that they don't have a circle. They don't. I know other people that have a circle, but it's only family. And it's probably not, I don't want to use the word diverse, but we don't have time now to think of the right word, but it's only, it's 100% family. It needs to be maybe a mixture of family and somebody outside of the family, right? So that you get those different. What's your experience with that?
Okay. So I have had many people ask me over the years, what if I don't have three? Okay. So that's to your point. Maybe you just have one. I've had a person tell me before, I don't have one. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
We need to focus on then being the kind of person in our life that we would want to be friends with. Oftentimes, if we don't have one friend that we can count on, one, maybe we're really lonely and we need to put ourselves out there. We need to join a meetup group. We need to go to church. We need whatever it is, right? We need to cultivate those friendships. I often tell people this with dating and friendship. Would you want to be friends with you? Would you want to date you? And that was a hard truth for me because, Brett, I was a career woman. I was single for a really long time. I met my husband 5 years ago. I just got married last December, but I would have to often, when in that reflection time, say, would you want to date you? Some people, we're looking for great friends. We're looking for a great partner, but we're not a great person ourselves, or we're cutting corners. And so we really have to do that self-reflection, which is not fun. And do that. I would say absolutely start to cultivate those relationships. The other thing I would say, and we teach about this in the movement too, and I really feel like you and I have just scratched the surface. We have to do this again, please. Because
we will.
This is so awesome.
You have my word.
Okay, good. We say radical vulnerability. By you having me on and allowing me to the space to go there and tell my story, what it does is it just allows other people the comfort to say, oh, wait, I'm not defective. I'm not broken. Wait, I've heard the voices too. Wait, I've had one of those experiences. what, she's done it too. Maybe I'm not so messed up. So when you have radical vulnerability, it gives other people permission to be themselves and not feel this weight and this yoke of perfection, which is killing us. It's sucking the very life out of us in business, relationships, marriages. And so, I would just say when you're radically vulnerable and you take off your mask, you say, me too, or I've been there, or I've experienced that, or this is what I've gone through. It allows other people the opportunity and space to do that too.
I call it connecting, and it's really important. It is all about connecting, engaging. You can use another word for it that way. And that doesn't mean that the two people have to agree on everything, but they connect and they ask questions, they listen carefully, and they engage with each other. And that's so important, not just in business, but today we're talking less about, going into this conversation, I plan to talk more about business than this, but I think that this evolved naturally from our conversation. It's much more important. But in life, it is about connections, and it's not a connection on LinkedIn. It's a connection in your life, in your circle. So I guess what I would just like to add on top of everything that you're saying is that I'd encourage all the viewers to give you a little bit of homework here and go out and talk to 5 people over the next week. Yes. And encourage them to build their circle, right? But explain that it's not just a circle of, it is a circle of trust, but this is a really close inner circle that you can go to. And you heard Rachel talk about, you go to celebrate. If there's something good, you don't just go when it's raining, right? Or when there's a problem, but you can also go there when there's a problem. So, I think that's really important. And that's what it takes to connect with people. And so all of you, 100% of you, even if you're not licensed, certified, whatever, you can become an advocate for this as well. And it's really simple. Everybody understands what a circle is. It's, it's like a soccer ball, right?
Yeah.
And so build that circle and get three people. 3 is an easy number, but for some people, and as both Rachel and I are talking about on here, some people don't have 3. Some people don't have 1. So go out and encourage 5 people. Have this conversation with 5 people about, do you have a circle of 3 that you can count on to celebrate, share in the accolades, okay, hold the trophy up together, or when times are difficult, can you call them?
Yes.
Okay, you don't need to call 911. You don't need to call, for an ambulance or professional help. Call them first, right? And that 4th call, it would be for the professionals if needed. But these 3 people in banking, we used to call the lines of defense, right? So you do something. The objective is to provide exceptional service to the customer. Okay, there's different ways you can do that. Unfortunately, sometimes you have people that take shortcuts, and they might not do it the right way. Yeah. Or they might sell you something, Rachel, that you don't want or you don't need. That's a problem. Okay, so we would set up these things called lines of defense, very similar to your circle. Mm-hmm. First line of defense would be one group of people that would make sure that it was done properly. But if they missed it, we would have a second line of defense. And that second line of defense kind of audits the first line of defense. And the third line of defense, widely known as auditors, is the final step in the process. And that's how big Fortune 500 companies protect their franchise through these different lines of defense. And I think your circle analogy is spot on for life, and it applies to everybody, whether people are in poverty or they're incredibly wealthy. I know, all you have to do is read a magazine and to know that certain wealthy people have more problems than people in poverty, right? And I'm not saying that people in poverty don't have problems. That's a big problem, okay? And there's a lot of people working on that, supporting for that, and I have a voice for that as well. But money really has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Would you agree?
I'm gonna borrow from American music lexicon. Okay, so just bear with me. Mo money, mo problems. And what I mean by that, just to break that down, is Yeah.
Yep.
Listen, I work with wealthy people. I've worked with wealthy people. I've had lots of money and I've had no money, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so, here's the thing. And I said this at the beginning, people are my currency, therefore I'm a billionaire. I'll get my rewards in heaven. Do I want to make
Yep.
more money? Absolutely. Because it means I can touch more lives. I can help more people. I'm not
Right.
ashamed of that. I think
Hmm.
there's a shame factor sometimes with money. But what I have found is sometimes people that have less are happier with less. There's not this never ending quelch for the next bag, the next watch, the next, luxury car. And I'm not saying you can't have those things. That's totally fine to have them, but do they have you? Are you owned by the desire for those things?
Yeah.
I was asked to speak at a very high end convention, and the person said, I think mental health is almost worse with this group because they all come to this mixer and they clink glasses and they say, my beautiful wife and my kids are doing so great and they're in the private school and they're doing this and that. And he said, in reality, the marriage is falling apart. The kids have mental health problems. One of them's in drugs. Somebody got flunked, and you're wearing this mask because you want to impress other people that have money. And I don't care if you have money or no money. We're human beings. We all encounter the same things. But I have found a lot of times people with less money are happier with less and focus on family, focus on, listen, I'm Latina. I've spent time in Italy as well. I think the Italians and the Hispanic culture just soak up life. Others as well, but the Italian, they just get life. They do big life, big food, big rest, big God, big fashion. And so, they know how to do it. And I totally agree with you, my friend.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It really comes down to, Rachel, what's your currency, right?
Mhm.
And you've said now 2 or 3 times in the past hour that your currency is people, and that says an awful lot. And I can tell you, having had a very different career path than you, but I'm seeing more and more common intersections that you and I have, very different, is that I feel the same way. I always put people before profits, and guess what? My performance was through the roof, right? And the profits grew because you put people before profits. Now, there's a lot of things going on. The Great Resignation, Joe pointed that out earlier on the program. Driven in part by short-term greed of companies, right? And then some people are just fed up, so they quit. So that's just a reality of what's happening today. But it's profits before people, and that's very unhealthy because it's not sustainable. Because it's counterintuitive, because it's actually the people that generate the profits, right?
And you're so right on. And here's the other thing. Until you address what's going on in here,
Yeah.
no new car, no Italian designer belt, no watch, no amount of money, none of that is ever going to fill the holes that are inside of here. You've got to work on this. I say this to people all the time. We're looking for other people to complete us. Maybe you are complete already, but you got to love yourself. It took me many years to fully love myself. Now, loving myself knows that I got a lot of work to do. I'm a queen under construction, and being a king or queen or royalty does not mean you're perfect. It just means you know better, so you do better. It means you're seeking, learning, growing. It means when you mess up, you say you're sorry. And it means you put people before you. So I would call you a king. I'm a queen under construction.
Yep.
And so, I just want to remind people of that if the ultimate goal, if you keep trying to shop it off or buy it or do that to quell something in here, you got it. That is a wake up call to start looking at what's going on in here in your soul.
It is inside out. There's no doubt about that. And I fortunately learned at a very young age to look at people straight in the heart before the exterior. And boy, has that paid off numerous, because it's you see things that other people can't see. It's quite amazing. It's almost like a superpower.
Yes.
So when I look at you, Rachel, and talk to you, talking, connecting, engaging is a big part of building any relationship. I look straight at your heart, right? and carefully absorbing everything as well. And then, sure, look at it's a beautiful attire that you have on today, right? That's fine. That's secondary to this, right? So I didn't know that you're going to wear that today when we got on the program, but what I did know is all about your purpose and what drives you. And that's just one example. But I think for the viewers, I'd like for everybody to really take away from this program to maybe this is the biggest one thing that you can do is to look at people from the inside.
Yes.
Okay. Not from the outside. And that includes yourself. So, if something's not going right with you, and even if you have a mental health issue, okay, understand, okay, get the help, but understand that you have to change some things as well in order for things to get better. Rachel, you told the story about that unfortunate night, right? Well, it turned out to be fortunate, and a big turning point in your life, but that was it could have gone either way. Okay. And you looked inside and you found your faith. Well, you had your faith, but you decided to vote with your faith, and that pulled you out. That was all inside, right? And on the other side was the snake, and I think that's a great example. So you've heard a couple of, extreme examples of the advantage of looking at somebody from the inside out. I'd like to, Jeremy Church joined as well. Jeremy, thank you as well. I appreciate you joining. He said, "Mo money, mo no problems." It amplifies who you are as a person. I couldn't agree more, Rachel. It speaks so loudly about yourself. Shafak, thank you for joining. Shafak's from the London area of Canada, and Shafak always joins programs. Thank you, Shafak, for joining in as well. And we have gone a whole hour, so we're going to have to do something again, Rachel.
Please.
And I'd love to do that, but I'd love to. Is there anything before we sign off that you wanted to say before we came on that you didn't have an opportunity to?
Here's my thing. I think it's called social media for a reason. I came across a gentleman the other day on Instagram that followed like 5 people, and he had all these followers. He followed 5 people. And I thought, what a shame for this man. It's called social for a reason. I follow so many people, I connect. So I'd love to hear from you. On my website, I'm changingthenarrative.org, the letter I, the letter M, changingthenarrative.org. That email goes straight to my email. I love connecting with people. I love getting messages because, like I said, people are my currency. So I love that. We're always looking for people that have gifts and talents to join the movement, that ever want to volunteer with the movement or come on and help us and work with us. Drop me an email. And we're also looking for great companies. And because you are so well connected in the business world across the planet, if your company cares about mental health, please drop me an email, and we can partner for progress. We need companies to put their money where their mouth is and help us grow and touch and affect more lives. And so I look forward to connecting with so many wonderful people because of you, my friend.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. So I look forward to that as well. And so, Rachel, thank you. I appreciate you sharing several of your personal stories. And that's really where we learn when we go through the rough patches. That's how I've learned in my life. And many people know about that. And I think we certainly, over the past hour, you kindly shared with us how you learned through some of the choppy periods as well, that they were not choppy, but highly turbulent. And I think this is really useful, and it's really kind of you to share that so that other people can benefit from that as well. And keep doing what you're doing. I think it's great. It's a wonderful example of purpose-driven from the inside and helping people on the outside, helping others, as Kevin encouraged you to do as well. So that came through to me. That resonates really well with me, loud and clear. And I think that's really, really wonderful as well. So Rachel, I'd like to thank you. Appreciate it very much. And look forward to definitely having you on again. I'll, for the viewers, we'll put Rachel's information. I'll repost this probably sometime tomorrow on the channels, and we'll basically sign off now on the Packard Network Live, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Rachel, once again. And next week, I have a very special guest. We'll be moving the cameras to Mumbai in India, and we'll be talking to a wonderful individual in that great country. So for now, everybody have a terrific Saturday. If you're in Australia, it's Saturday morning, and have a terrific Friday everywhere else. Thanks very much.